Hi everybody, episode 20. We are on the roaring 20s again, and of course that means Harding, Coolidge, and Hoover. The Republican old guard returns. Harding says that we are going to return to normalcy. They are Republicans. Remember, the Republicans rejected Woodrow Wilson, the Democrat Woodrow Wilson's League of Nations. They are going back to laissez-faire economics of the Gilded Age, the Gilded Ages. Harding, we'll talk about just a little bit about Harding and everything, but he dies in 1923, and then Coolidge takes over. So most of the Roaring Twenties is about Coolidge, who famously says the business of America is business. Silent Cal. All right, the three Republican presidents of the 1920s, Harding, Coolidge, and Hoover, embraced a pro-business domestic agenda and promoted isolation on the world stage, conditions very similar to the Gilded Age. So remember, you have to know that we are isolationists, that all of that stuff we talked about yesterday in class is happening all over the world, but we're roaring 20s it. We're having a good old time here. Ohio, baby. Okay, Harding spent his days as president playing poker with buddies, golfing, drinking whiskey, despite prohibition, and reportedly having sex in White House closets with his mistresses. Come on, buddy. Warren, what are you doing, brother? I am a man of limited talents from a small town. I don't seem to grasp that I am president. He's a little thick. Having sex in closets. Bro, what's up? Like, think about that today. Somebody's going in those closets to get stuff. He's the one, I think, that started throwing out the first pitch. President Warren G. Harding was tall, handsome, and popular, but had a mediocre mind and hated to hurt people's feelings. Every president has thrown out the first pitch until right now. I do not believe Donald Trump has thrown out a first pitch in a baseball game yet. I might be wrong, but I don't think he has. Every other president has done it since him. He was a glad-hander. He liked to be popular. He was playing cards and drinking whiskey and smoking cigarettes and late into the night in the White House with his buddies, or golfing, or fraternizing in the closets with his mistresses, apparently. I would like the government to do all it can to mitigate, then, in understanding, in mutuality of interest, in concern for the common good, our tasks will be solved. He wants to make everybody happy. Without government, labor unions lost much of their power in the 1920s, resulting in a 30% drop in membership. Labor unions are really, really pushing because after World War I, after the Great War, all of that militarism, all of that industrialization to build weapons, it ceased. And when that stopped, we had a little bit of a recession for a year or two after the Great War. And as a result, a lot of people lost jobs, salaries and wages declined. And so labor unions were trying to do their best, and they were going on strikes and strikes and strikes. But then it turns out 30% decline in membership. The Supreme Court killed a federal child labor law. We just checked the other day. I think that Nicholas said it was like 1938 is when we actually finally get rid of child labor in America. What? 1938? Supreme Court. No, it's illegal. It's illegal to ban child labor. Come on. That's awful. Harding largely ignored antitrust laws, and monopolistic corporations expanded. So it's almost like this undoing of the progressive era and these antitrust laws. I don't know what to do, where to turn in this taxation matter. Somewhere there must be a book that tells all about it. Where I could go to straighten it out in my mind. But I don't know where the book is, and maybe I couldn't read it if I found it. He's depressing for Buckeyes. The Interstate Commerce Commission was led by men sympathetic to railroads. That means that they gave them free passes to do whatever they wanted, that it wasn't regulating anything. Tariffs were raised from 27% to 35% because businessmen feared a flood of European goods into the U.S. after the war. That's terrible for farmers, but it's good for business. And again, Silent Cal, the business of America is business. Look at that, tariff of abominations. Are you freaking kidding me? Over 60%. And then the one you have to know about, the Smoot-Hawley tariff, is going to have a big impact when it comes to the Great Depression, that we have raised these really high tariffs. Now again, tariffs are what we put to block imports to make it be a lot more expensive for imports to come into our country so that our goods here can be sold in the country. But what that means is that the businesses can sell them for whatever prices they want, and the consumers, the poor people, can't afford them. And then it also, for the farmers, it blocks our tariffs to other countries because they raise tariffs against us, and our biggest thing that we send to other countries are crops. So it hurts the farmers every time, hurts the farmers. The farmers were hurt in the Roaring 20s. They were already being hurt by the Roaring 20s. But raising the tariff hurt the U.S. because Europeans needed to sell goods to the U.S. to make money and pay back war loans to us. We want them to make money so they can pay us back. Farmers, farmers, farmers. American farmers prospered during World War I. Remember, they were making many, many, many crops for us and for the Allied troops, the other countries fighting with us. But in the 1920s, the demand for food decreased and farmers fell quickly into poverty. 1920s were terrible for the farmers, and of course the 30s were even worse. I mean, look at these old machines. Farmers turned to the federal government for relief, but got very little relief. Business, pro-business, that's over there. Over here, farmers and working people, too bad. Okay, American isolationism returns in the 1920s. We talked about that the other day. American isolationism of the 1920s was fueled by frustrations over our involvement in and the outcome of the First World War, combined with growing nativist fears, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, of immigrant communists in our midst. Racist 1920s. Woodrow Wilson kicks everybody out of his cabinet that's white that's not white. The U.S. never actually ratified the Treaty of Versailles, so we're technically still at war with Germany. Oops. After World War I, the U.S. maintained isolationism and limited military intervention that could have promoted global order. If we would have just said that we're going to come over there and smack heads, just like what Teddy would have wanted to do, then people would have maybe cleaned up their act. People often believe that if we had put up some sort of show of force against Hitler, that perhaps this world war wouldn't have happened if we had stepped in. But we were isolationists. We're like, no, we can't hear you. So there you go. Communist Soviet Union growing big. China in a civil war. Japan becoming imperial. Mussolini and Hitler becoming imperial. You have to know that this is an era of authoritarian rulers, that we have these big, strong authoritarian countries, and we're like, do. We don't hear you. We don't see you. We don't care. The U.S. did not join nor cooperate much with the League of Nations, although eventually we sent unofficial observers. Come on. That doesn't mean anything. Secretary of State Hughes secured access to Middle East oil for American businesses, beginning a century of economic exploitation of the region. So whenever people say, why do they hate us? That's your answer. Because everybody in the world, I don't know if you guys can see all of it. Yeah, I guess so. Everybody in the world, all of the industrialized nations of the world are going to rape, rob, and pillage these Middle Eastern countries of their oil ever since the end of World War I. That's why they hate us. We have gone in and raped, robbed, and pillaged and stolen their natural resources, specifically their oil. I told you previously that Sykes and Picot in 1916 drew these lines. All of this used to be the Ottoman Empire, the sick man of Europe. And then Sykes and Picot literally drew these lines that still exist today. If I remember correctly, Saudi Arabia got to be so big because so much of it was desert. And then later we find out that there's a lot of oil under there, so they are incredibly, incredibly wealthy. Nobody really knows how much money Saudi Arabia actually really has. They are an isolated kingdom. They are still a kingdom. They have a king. Harding wanted to disarm the U.S. military. What? But he was nervous about the British and Japanese naval power, as he should have been. The Anglo-Japanese alliance, that's us and Japan, Britain and Japan, obligated Britain to aid Japan in the event of a Japanese war with us. With us! Britain's going to fight against us. What up, Britain? And then, of course, we make Japanese look as terrible as possible. Japan got a guarantee that the U.S. and Britain would stop fortifying their Far East territories, including the Philippines. So here's the point. You have to know, for all the way since the Meiji Restoration we talked about of 1867, after we opened Japan in 1853 with Commodore Matthew Perry and the Black Ships, the Meiji Restoration industrialized Japan, leading them to be a strong imperial power. The word imperial means empire. They want to create an empire, and this is where they want to do it. They want to take over all of East Asia, so they want a guarantee from us that we will leave them alone, including the Philippines. If you remember correctly, that Emilio Aguinaldo wanted independence, and we didn't let him have it, and so we are in control of the Philippines, and Japan isn't about that. With the Kellogg-Briand Pact in 1928, 15 nations agreed to outlaw war to settle disputes. Diplomacy, diplomacy, diplomacy. The League of Nations settle disputes through talking, not through war. And it's called the spirit of Kellogg-Briand. That in the spirit of Kellogg-Briand, nobody should even think about being antagonistic toward other countries militarily. This is Harding. He had one of the most corrupt administrations. People stole all sorts of money. He himself was not corrupt. He was probably not smart enough to be corrupt. But people in his administration were very similar to Grant. Grant wasn't corrupt, but his administration was. Harding wasn't corrupt, but his administration was. Warren G. Harding's presidency remains among the most scandal-ridden in U.S. history, reflective of his unwillingness to regulate big business, like the Gilded Age, or even members of his own administration. They did what they want. Laissez-faire economics for big business, and he basically let the people in his cabinet run the country while he's playing poker or apparently in the broom closet. Come on, Warren. I have no trouble with my enemies. I can take care of my enemies in a fight. But my friends, my freaking friends, they're the ones who keep me walking the floors at night, because all of his friends were the ones that were being corrupt and stealing from the government. In 1923, Americans learned of a number of scandals within the Harding administration, probably helped lead to his heart attack. He was only 57. I'm 58 currently. He died at 57. So all of these guys, they all got to do what they want, basically. Harding was unaffiliated with this wrongdoing, but failed to detect widespread corruption in his cabinet. That's all the people that work for him. Attorney General Harry Daugherty was accused of illegal sale of pardons and liquor permits. So pardons. He sold pardons. People would be arrested, they'd go to jail, and he would pardon them if they paid them for the pardons. Come on. The Teapot Dome scandal is one of the most famous in history. Secretary of the Interior Albert Fall ranks among the great political scandals in U.S. history. He sold oil that was supposed to be used for the Navy, and he got these huge kickbacks for selling this oil. He leased public lands in Teapot Dome. It looks like a teapot. See? Looks like a teapot. Wyoming and Elk Hills, California, to oilman Harry Sinclair and Edward Doheny. That was meant to be for the U.S. Navy for oil, and he sold it and got the money, got the kickbacks. Fall received a bribe of $100,000 from Doheny and $300,000 from Sinclair. They called it a loan. Of course, if you never pay it back, it's not much of a loan. Bye. Fall received a $100,000 fine and a 1-year prison sentence, the first person from any administration to ever go to jail. Someone noted that Fall was so crooked they had to screw him into the ground upon his death. And then, heart attack. August 1923, Harding died of pneumonia and thrombosis, so he didn't live to see the uproar from the scandals. I am not fit for this office and never should have been here. Bro, what? Silent Cow. In the discharge of the duties of this office, there is one rule of action more important than all others. It consists in never doing anything that someone else can do for you. Coolidge slept at least 10 hours every night. No problem, slept like a baby, and often added a lengthy nap in the afternoon. He kept his hands off of everything, let it be, laissez-faire politics, laissez-faire economics, laissez-faire presidency. Let it be. Mr. Coolidge, I made a bet against a fellow who said it was impossible to get more than 2 words out of you. You lose. Foreign debt and the Dawes Plan. You have to know about the Dawes Plan. We are going to get to it in a second. But the foreign debt is very important to us because the debt is owed to us from World War I. The U.S. helped Germany restructure its reparations. They had to pay to repair what had happened in the war. Remember Article 231, the war guilt clause blamed entirely blamed Germany, the Article 231 of the Versailles Treaty. And so they had these huge reparations that nobody could ever pay. It was like $500 billion in our money. Hoping it would allow our allies to repay world war debts and ease tensions in Europe, and safeguarding our future isolationism, keeping us out of war. Okay, as isolationism continued in the Coolidge era, the U.S. still struggled to get Europe to pay its war debts. We needed them to pay us back for all of the money they borrowed and the weapons and everything they bought. Article 231, the German people must pay for all damage to civilians on land, sea, or air. The U.S. made Britain and France pay back their war debts to the U.S., and therefore Germany was forced to pay heavy war reparations to Britain and France. So this is clever. To pay these reparations, Germany printed money as much as they could. They printed the money so they could pay for it, which caused massive inflation, and they quickly defaulted on their reparations payments to Britain and France, which meant Britain and France could not pay their loans to us. People used it to start fires. That's how meaningless and worthless the German mark became. Here it is in 1918, and then how much value of 1 gold mark in paper marks. So that's how many dollars that it would cost. That's how much it was. Terrible. They need 1 million? What is that? I don't even know what that is to have $1. They were worthless, just paper. So Dawes. In 1924, the Dawes Plan, created by the Vice President, rescheduled German reparations payments to make it easier for them to pay. It's called the Dawes Plan, not to confuse with the Dawes Act, which is about Native Americans. Here it is. The international financial system under the Dawes Plan and Young Plan. So, the Allies owed us money. So they had to pay their war debts to us. We took that money and loaned it to Germany, who needed it to pay their reparations to the British and French, who used it to pay us, who used it to pay Germany in loans so they could pay reparations to the Allies So of course Hitler is going to say, you know what, bye, we're not paying that anymore, we're done, and as a result, then the British and French couldn't pay us, and the whole thing collapsed. The Dawes Plan created a huge circle where the Allies' debt became Germany's debt, and the U.S. actually made even more money until they didn't. Hoover, 1928. Herbert Hoover won a landslide victory in 1928 and hoped to continue the prosperity of the 1920s, but unfavorable economic trends and the decision to raise the tariff proved disastrous for the U.S. economy. Coolidge's logical successor was the economic genius Herbert Hoover. He was a good politician. He was a good administrator. He was good at his job. It was unfortunate that he gets the job right before the Great Depression is going to hit. It is not his fault, but historically, we look at him as if it's his fault. Radio had become an important campaign tool. Hoover sparkled while the Catholic Democratic candidate Al Smith sounded dumb. Remember, we're only in the 1920s, and we're anti-immigrant and anti-Catholic and anti-Jew, and we have a Catholic that's running for the Democratic president, for the nomination for Democratic president. That doesn't make any sense. He loses. Okay, I outlived the bastards, referring to those who blamed him for the Great Depression. He lived to be 90 years old. White House servants and groundskeepers received strict orders to hide whenever President Hoover passed by. Those who failed to do so risked dismissal. They would hide in closets. Guess who was in the closet last, maybe? Yuck. They had to hide. He's ranked 34th out of 45 people. It's actually 44 people because Cleveland was twice. That's a good thing that you should know. Like when people say, how many presidents were there? Donald Trump is the 45th president, so people think there have been 45 presidents. There have been 44 because we have one that was 2 different terms that were not in sequence, as you know, Cleveland. And so that's a good trick. That's a good trick. How many presidents were there? Hoover Ball. Hoover sought to continue the pro-business policies of his predecessors, but reached out to help farmers. Finally, somebody's reaching out to help farmers, but it is too little and it is too late. It may not be perfect, but I'm sure it'll help quite a bit. The Scarecrow. So here it is. That's the famous thing that he does, though. The one thing that he shouldn't have done, he did. In 1930, the Hawley-Smoot tariff raised tariffs to 60%. 60%. It destroyed the farmers that he was trying to help. Economists generally regard this tariff act as the greatest policy blunder in American economic history. Imports plunged 2/3 because they couldn't afford to pay that tariff. And remember, we need them to sell us stuff so they can make money to pay our debts. From $4.4 billion to $1.5 billion, and our exports to other countries fell from $5.4 billion to $2.1 billion. We destroyed the American farmers with the Smoot-Hawley tariff. Hawley-Smoot, Smoot-Hawley, either way. Same difference. So that's a terrible one, 1828. But then this, the Smoot-Hawley tariff. And look what tariffs we have after that. We do not, because we know it's ridiculous. It's horrible. It's bad. It's a terrible decision. Sadly, President Trump has a big tariff war still going on with China. Most people have learned from our mistakes, but the tariff war is not good for anybody. And it's happening with us with China now. Hawley-Smoot ranks among the worst economic decisions in U.S. history, stalling foreign trade as the U.S. was on the verge of a depression. It just pushes us over the edge into the Great Depression. Have a great day. Talk to you later. Bye.